Like the AI transformation in small organizations should happen much faster than in big ones. And there will be a gap of time where that disparity will be huge. And I think a lot of disruption will occur.
Welcome to Future of Fandom, the podcast where leagues, teams, and federations learn how to turn passive viewers into loyal superfans through gamification, loyalty, and next-gen engagement. Let's build what's next together.
Ari Evans, welcome to the Future of Fandom. This podcast is a decade in the making.
It definitely is.
I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for taking the time.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to dig into a lot of different topics with you today. I think, we talk about these things off the record quite a bit, but it'll be good to impart some of that wisdom to the audience here as well. So why don't we start from the beginning? Let's start with a little bit of your background. Obviously you have your background going from investment banking at Goldman to product management at Zynga, and then obviously it's been close to over a decade, I guess, at Maestro as well. I'd love to know about a little bit about your journey and how that ties into what you're doing today.
I've been an entrepreneur since I was a little kid, so I always had the affliction, the itch, whatever we want to call it. When I was working at Goldman, that was really just exposure to kind of how financial markets work, really being deep in it and kind of understanding that. But I felt like the day-to-day of what I was actually doing wasn't really appealing to me, wasn't really creative enough. And so I decided I wanted to become eventually a CEO and build products. So I went to grad school at Stanford and then ended up working at Zynga as a product manager. And that was just a game changer for my whole life because at Zynga, it was the first time that, like, I'm a hardcore person, I'd say, in general, with everything I do. I kind of go really deep into everything that I do. But I was building games for casuals, right? Like casual fans. But the monetization system was such that very few people contributed most of the revenue for those products. I'm talking like 1%. And then most people paid $0. And it really opened my eyes to this idea of like how you can do freemium business models that are basically subsidized by the whales. And after that experience at Zynga, I started thinking like, hey, why isn't this model existing outside of games, right? We should apply it to other areas. And at the time I was trying to apply it to music, which I still think there's something there, but it was just, we were doing like NFTs like 10 years ago, like too early, before blockchain, right? Like get a virtual collectible, get content through the virtual collectible. But we decided not to do that and pursue it because it wasn't really it was too niche. So I wanted to do things like that in media. And over time, I sort of realized that to do something like that, we needed to help our customers build direct to consumer experiences. We were building interactive live streams really, really, really early, like before YouTube had chat for live content, right? Where like chat was like innovative, right? Twitch had just started, right? It was like the early days. And I just had this idea at the time that like brands are going to want to have a Twitch-like experience, right? There's something about this that's the future of media. We're just scratching the surface on what interactivity can be. And I know you, of course, believed that and have spent many years the industry get to where it needs to get to there. The problem though, and we've talked about it so many times together, that was too early. It took way longer for the industry to actually be ready for this like highly interactive multi-screen world that we find ourselves in right now. And that was frankly one of the most difficult parts of our entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I felt like we've had to pull the industry along rather than like it wasn't ready for it. We have had to evangelize and really build that.
Yeah, we had to pull the industry along. And in the process of sort of waiting for the industry to get there, each kind of had to pivot a little bit to find other ways to and sustain until the market was ready for the kind of original vision that we had, which was very difficult.
I mean, look, gosh, I think our paths first cross. I remember at the NFL TechCrunch Award, which is actually kind of funny. It's been a decade. It was at Stanford Business School a decade ago, and that was my first Super Bowl when I got to go for it. And it's now back at the Levi Stadium this weekend. I just remember you were so far ahead of the curve. Obviously, esports was an area that you were focusing on early on because that was the industry that was ripe for it. Right? You didn't need to evangelize; everyone already knew what worked for esports audiences. Bringing that to the world of broadcast, and I think around 2016, I would say that was like the first wave of OTT. It was pretty much TV over IP. There was nothing special, nothing new about it. It was just, essentially just don't go dark was the only KPI. Make sure that people can stream.
And it took a long time for the service to be reliable enough with just core streaming infrastructure, way longer than expected. And I would argue that it hasn't been until streaming overtook cable from an importance standpoint that we were actually able to unlock, okay, now that we're digital first, not cable first, what can we do that's special? That's only been the last 2 years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, honestly, for me, getting people to understand that it's not a zero sum game. It's not like, okay, now that you are doing this on TV and streaming, it's not a one to many experience anymore. You can really truly take advantage of what the digital medium has to offer through one to one experiences, through personalization. I mean, people have been talking about data forever, but what do you want to do with that data? How do you want to use that data? That's where I feel like the biggest education has happened. We had to prove it out with first early movers, first adopters, build those case studies, and then show it to others who are then like, okay, now we're ready for it.
Right. Personalization too, right? It's been talked about for a decade. There have been very few actual implementations of it. But then you see something like TikTok come around with like an incredible personalization algorithm. And now everyone's competing with TikTok, right? That's one of Netflix's biggest competitors is TikTok, right? One of the things that you touched on earlier that's kind of a related issue is we were going into esports because I didn't have to convince them about interactivity. Twitch was already, it was native to the space or endemic to the space. But what I did have to convince them of, which I frankly failed at, was direct to consumer. Whereas, because fishing where the fish are was so strong and the publishers didn't really want to do their own D2C plays. Whereas in other areas, like in sports, it was kind of the opposite, right? Like they already had the strategy of going D2C, at least, the broadcasters certainly in leagues more and more so. But now we need to explain why you want interactivity there because that's your differentiation. That's how you actually monetize the core. So it's like every vertical kind of has its nuances and differences, right? Like for music, you remember this chapter, right? We were doing a ton of pay-per-views during the pandemic and we thought, great, now there's this new monetization model for the core. This is gonna continue, right? All the curves were hockey sticking and whatever, and then like that behavior stopped.
Yeah, COVID stopped. Everyone went back to physical world, and virtual events completely stopped.
So it's just been really interesting to see. But I think eventually all these trends are still headed toward the same eventual direction, which is like you need two strategies. You need a top of funnel strategy for audience awareness, and you need a bottom of funnel strategy for how you engage and monetize the core.
And convert. I mean, this is what I've admired about you from the beginning. As much as I think you're to the force in terms of running this business and really like taking the bull by the horn, like, all the twists and turns, ups and downs, persevering, similar stories. I think we both have had similar paths in that sense. I think the part that I admire the most, which I'm actually kind of jealous of, is the product thinking. And, obviously your background with Zynga and how do you funnel conversion was such a big part of that. That's the part that I feel like you bring to the conversation when you're talking to these partners because they're not thinking about it. As a tools company, you kind of expect partners to already know what they want to do, and you're using and you want to dig a hole, you're going to use shovels for it. But when you don't even know that you need to dig a hole or why do you need to dig a hole, that's where the strategy and the product thinking actually comes into play. That's where the expertise. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why people want to work with you is because you're not just bringing them the capabilities, you're also bringing them the use cases along with those capabilities. And I feel like that's where I'd love to dig a little bit deeper on how you're back, what you learned from your time at Zynga, but also how you've applied that to the industry.
Yep. So this is I think, pretty interesting story that was very eye opening for me. So I worked at a games company, and it was the company was really run by PMs. Less so than game designers, which has its pros and cons, right? The pro side was everything was super mega data driven. We were running tons and tons of experiments at the same time. All the PMs were excellent SQL people, right? We're constantly running queries. And every single feature that we put out, and it was a crazy volume of features we were putting out, we would have to forecast the success of those features in dollars and adoption. We got so good at it, right, that we could forecast any new feature we were rolling out probably within like 5 to 10% consistently, right? And that would be excellent for the business, obviously, to forecast that thing, but also just fascinating from like a product standpoint. Like, can you really forecast the success of your product that well? Incredible. So when I later on in my career, when I was going to gaming companies and talking to them about, basically trying to do a better job with understanding their audiences and having better metrics, something beyond just concurrent views on Twitch or views on Twitch, which is frankly the only information they're getting from Twitch, it was mind boggling that there was no further rigor in those same organizations, right? Like a game publisher, 0 rigor, just like this huge number. That's the thing that we wanna hit. Can we make that number bigger? That's it. No understanding like, okay, how do we convert viewership to buying things in the game or doing things in the game or actually moving the bottom line of the business?
And what do you think that was? It was different groups, different departments, different skill sets, or different priorities?
Definitely different groups, and also, like, if you start to build, like, an esports division, you probably hire broadcast people. Broadcast people don't have those kinds of metrics because they come from a world of TV, one to many, right? There was no loop of data feedback coming back that you actually use to improve anything. Yeah, and any of these companies, it's very siloed. There's not a lot of communication between the departments. And even though we would try to act as the bridge between them, eventually we kind of, we didn't give up, but it was just such a tough boulder to push up the hill all the time that we're just like, "Man, it's crazy."
I sort of, I think for me, it's akin to the shift from brand marketing to performance marketing. TV advertising was, just like the cable bundle was a beautiful business. TV advertising worked well for decades, and it was one to many, and that's why the large brands work better. But then when you started thinking about D2C brands and performance marketing came into play, and whether it was like simple examples like the Dollar Shave Club as an example compared to FMCG brands that have been more focused on the brand being the hero versus the conversion funnel. I feel like it's the same exact story when you come from broadcast to digital and OTT, right? Like you need that data. You need to understand how the performance of it so that you can keep iterating and running experiments at scale, which you didn't necessarily have to do it the same way. So that the ethos or the way you were trained kind of was a complete shift in mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally new set of muscles, right? And I think these organizations don't either they don't have the muscle or they don't realize that they need to create the muscle. And so that
They
muscle
didn't. I think I do see change happening more now. But
I would
yeah,
agree.
for the
Yeah.
past decade or so, that was the experience for us.
Yeah. The muscles definitely are getting stronger or realizing what they need to do. So, for example, like clubs who are trying to do D2C solutions, realizing what it actually takes to do that and how to do engagement, how to offer something exclusive, what can they do working around the rights restrictions that they have, and so on. Like that is happening for sure. And I think, we talked about this many times over the years, but you don't if you exclusively do a social strategy, then you're completely dependent on that platform, right? Which is by definition not ever going to be fully aligned with your interests. I think we've seen this story enough times that it's time to, kind of adopt a dual pronged approach, right? It's not one or the other, it's both. You need to, you have different strategies for different audience segments. And that's really the thing. We've said it so many times in this call, but it's not one size fits all. You actually do know who's on the other end. You can segment those audiences and create different experiences or different segments. And you must do that. Coming back to Zynga.
I do want to talk about personalized interactive viewing, which is a key focus for Maestro. But before we get there, I just want to touch upon one quick thing, which was to end your journey as a product manager and how you think. Obviously, the business has gone through quite a few pivots. From esports to music to D2C during COVID. I think the biggest shift for me has been the change in approach from a full stack offering to more SDKs for connected platforms and stuff. I think that's been the big hockey stick curve for you guys, right? I'd love to know a little bit more about how you got to that decision because suddenly one day I remember you calling me and you're like, I've got to show you what we've built. This is going to change everything. And here you have like multiple TV platforms supported by SDK. And I thought it was brilliant, but I'd love to know how you got to that.
What a journey that was. So we have like a web, like the full stack solution we had for web, and we were starting to move it toward mobile. And some of our clients were asking, like, hey, we really want TV apps. This was actually during the creator days. We were trying to get the creator market. And when we interviewed lots of different creators, and The ones who were like already had a solution, like Vimeo or Uscreen, they're like, we love what you offer, but we won't switch unless you offer the TV apps. And it was like very clear from the feedback. So we had a few years back during the pandemic, we were building TV apps for a project we were doing with Live Nation. The company we were building on, UI TV, got acquired by Warner, and then they pulled it away from everyone else to work on it. So that kind of just stopped the development in its tracks at that point. And it took us like 2 years to decide if we wanted to do that again, right? Reapproach it. The platform had evolved a lot by this time where we had, it's kind of technical, but we had like a very good like JSON format that we could, and a really good API. So we said, okay, let's just build these clients that build front end components and see if we can like how hard it would be to create apps. That decision to go experiment in that direction changed which was somewhat accidental, right? Changed the entire company direction because we went to a place where you could, like, this cross-platform vision started to come to life. And building for TV, we realized how much it sucks to build for TV.
Which
Literally
is
have to
why you
build,
have a moat.
right, you have to build everything you build 4 times. At least 4 times, which is, and they're all different languages, and there's all kinds of different nuances and gotchas, and, like, even the operational side of managing that effort is complex. So not only do we do the cross-platform value, which companies definitely want, but TV is an area where traditionally, even if you're doing mobile and web in-house, you're unlikely to be doing TV in-house in a lot of ways because it's complex.
And also it's just resource intensive.
It's very resource intensive.
Yeah.
So, that's how we've luckily been able to get very significant contracts where, not only are we offering the personalized interactive video, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but also the go to market, right? Time acceleration. That is really what is benefiting these companies.
This is let's dig into this topic a little bit. Just the whole aspects of cross platform. Obviously, most of the innovation in street sports streaming usually is like, we talked about it. Web and mobile has been where it's easiest to build, easiest to deploy, easiest to test and learn. But a lot of the viewing happens on the big screen devices. So I'd just love to understand, some nuances that most people may not appreciate about the different form factors, the different input devices, the hardware constraints, especially when you're working in markets with low bandwidth. Maybe they don't have as great of an internet as or Wi-Fi or 5G as the European or US markets do. What does that mean for you in terms of when you're developing and you're working with these partners across all of these devices?
It's a whole new paradigm, right? Because your input is different, right? People aren't sitting with the remote in their hand the entire time they watch. Should it be the remote? Should it be the phone? Right? Should we treat the TV as the first screen or the second screen? There's
That's actually interesting. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah.
right. I think that there's actually kind of this misconception that like your phone is the second screen. I think actually the TV is the second screen,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what does that unlock in your brain for like what your experience should be, right? Especially, younger audiences, right? Like your phone is your primary device, not the secondary device. Just because it's smaller, it doesn't mean it's the primary. The low power device issue is definitely a big pain. There's such a diversity in what you need to be able to support because a lot of these companies don't want to say, well, 20% of my audience is using the first Roku that ever came out. I'm making up numbers, but it's a substantial size audience that has like the crappiest earliest one. At a certain point, you need to say, okay, well, you can't have this experience, but everyone's trying to figure out like what's the least common denominator that gets the biggest surface area that we can have, which creates a lot of constraints.
I mean, we've all faced that even in the mobile world. Like, you stop supporting certain versions of Android, certain versions of iOS. But I feel like the upgrade cycles for mobile phones are probably far faster than for big screen TVs and devices at home devices.
I mean, if you have a TV from the 2016, mid 2010s, you're probably still using it.
Yeah.
It works
It
just fine.
works. It
The
works.
quality is great, the blacks aren't as dark, who cares, right? Like, that's about it, right? Yeah, that is an important thing, and I think also just, like, how do you actually build what's the right UX for these different platforms? How do you have a design system that flexes so you don't have to literally redesign every single little thing for every platform it's gonna be on? You now have, like, a lot of best practices, we have good starting points, we have
Animations, how animations might work on different platforms and devices with computational constraints.
yeah. That's a big topic and really complicated. And, you know, a big thing that we wanted to do for TV, right, was also how to deal with such significant scale, right? So, like with ESPN, you know, they do like 40,000 events a year, right? They don't want to have a person doing anything, ideally, right? Like, how much can you automate? And so, a big part of that was we built this rule builder, right? Which is like a no code, it's kind of like Zapier. You can choose the trigger event and then what happens when that trigger hits. And you can just upload an animation file and map the metadata. So, like the graphic gets made on the fly and it gets targeted to specific users in that personalized way with tags. That just like really speeds up how fast you can experiment and innovate to figure out like what is actually going to move the needle to drive users down the funnel. That was a lot of effort to figure out even what that should be.
And do you have any early, maybe not nothing sensitive, but like early signs for how that is working?
Yeah. I mean, like our whole career with Maestro, overlays were one of our first and earliest tools. And we know that they're a really effective driver to anything, right? We have rules of thumb for things like polls and trivia. I'm sure you have your own kind of metrics around those too. Like, let's say 20% of the audience is going to use them, something like that. And we know certain overlays get certain types of engagement. If you're able to personalize it, it's a bit early, but like we are seeing higher click-through rates. It's not that surprising. And ultimately, you know, kind of taking a step back, in all of marketing and every other form of media, we have just-in-time messaging that's personalized. You would never send a blast email campaign without personalization. In video, it's the only medium we don't have it yet, right? It seems like a glaringly obvious opportunity. So that's why when we're adding these personalized graphics that come up just for you, like when you want to bet or when you got fantasy points in your league, right? That is material and interesting and valuable to you in that moment. And so just like every other marketing campaign, your click-through rate's much higher. It's not rocket science.
Usually you would have thought about that type of a personalized message coming in through push notification on mobile. When you're on a TV experience, how does that manifest for a user? Are they still using the mobile phone to reach the user, or are they doing it at the same time? Like then the messaging is different on your mobile phone push notification versus what shows up while you're in stream for you, as an example.
Yes. And I think it's just kind of a different entry point. So, I mean, we've all seen like Amazon, most ads have a add it to your cart button, or YouTube now has a lot of like send me more information, right? Like we're starting to see these flows. Even if the percentage of click through is low, first of all, from an attribution standpoint, it's so much better than like did something materialize out of them seeing, right? It's not just an impression. And then kind of going going further from there, it's just what do I want the user journey to be from that point? Like with Amazon, I added it to my cart. Okay, but I'm not checking out from the TV. I'm gonna check out from my phone later. On TV, do do I wanna send you a bet to your phone? Maybe I have to for all the regulations and so on around that. But maybe for other experiences like games, maybe I want you to play a game on your TV while you're watching the game. So it just kinda depends on what experience you're trying to create and what you want the action to be for the user to take afterward.
I was just thinking about it. Like, we specifically brought up Amazon as an example. As a consumer, I do love the Amazon Prime live broadcast just as much as I love the YouTube TV user experience from a user's perspective. I think they both have cracked that nut. But like even when I'm watching an NFL game on Amazon Prime, like the way they use, I guess Amazon does have exclusive data through NFL, like specific next gen stats kind of a thing. But the way they're using it in terms of storytelling, just like they are doing this add to cart and like conversion. I mean, they really are in my mind like the gold standard, even compared to someone like a Netflix, for example. Still pretty much broadcast. They use that experience obviously is different, but in broadcast experience is pretty much the same. It just brings me to the point for how are you like how much do you have to convince partners to try out different things versus partners saying, hey, I saw this over there. Like, I remember like when Manning cast happened, everyone wanted to do simulcasts. I suppose Manningcast was the one that made it successful. During COVID, a lot of partners were doing simulcasts and like multiple creators, etc. How much of that is push versus pull? Where people already know what they want and they're asking you for how to do it versus you're telling them you haven't thought about this, give this a try, and them saying yes.
It's a great question. We have benefited a lot from Amazon and YouTube and others putting in a lot of effort into this pinch back type of experience. Now that ESPN has rolled theirs out, it's now become table stakes, right? Everyone needs something like that. And when you use it, I think the reaction for most people is this feels very natural, like a product that we've had for a long time, even though we've only had it in 2025,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Why haven't
Um,
we had this all this
why
while?
haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've
Yeah.
certainly been talking about it for long enough, so
Yeah.
it's great that it's finally here. It's literally pinch me in my dreaming still, like that we finally got there. The good news is that now that there's like a framework and a scaffolding, it's like much more straightforward to add new features to that and experiment. Yes, certainly we know that our customers are keeping a very close eye on what their competitors are doing, and they come to us with, "Hey, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that, we like what they did, but we want to change it to be more like this." Right? A lot of people are experimenting with a better multi-view experience that's very hot right now.
Yeah, Multiview is definitely everyone's doing Multiview.
Multi-view's hot.
I'd love
Um,
to know the numbers though. Like, does Multiview actually? Because I haven't found myself using the Multiview experience a lot.
I think it goes back to this, the industry needs something that feels personalized that they can check the box on, and production knows how to make multi-view work faster than you know what I mean? It's like it all comes back to the who are the people who are making the experiences and who are making the decisions and sort of what jumps out at them.
I mean, I can see a personas. If you think about it from a persona standpoint, I can see like a betting persona who has multiple, like a lot riding on multiple different games or an outcome, or like one day in a year when there are four games happening at the same time, and the result of each game can decide the outcome of who goes into the playoffs versus who gets relegated in European soccer. So I can see March Madness is a great example of a multi-view experience. But like on a day-to-day basis, I just don't see myself like I don't have enough attention span to watch one game without checking my email and phone to do four games or four events at the same time. I just don't know is this data driven or is it like you said, like table stakes and well, they have it, so we should have it as well.
I don't have enough data to really answer the question, but what I suspect is happening is one, if you feel like the thing you just said, we don't have enough attention span to pay attention to one game, everyone's very aware of that because there's been studies. If you have multiple games on at the screen at the same time, the likelihood that it's capturing your attention because something interesting is going on in some quadrant of the screen is higher. So I think they're banking on that a little bit. There's also more of this idea of like, well, maybe I can like watch the news while I watch the game and kind of mixing different content formats together. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I'm not sure what the uptake is, but there's certainly a lot more discussion around it.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, like different content types working together rather than the same content in multiple different ways because
If you can watch the news and see the headlines while you watch like the soccer match, sure, you can probably imagine you're doing that, right?
I suppose this is, we obviously our background with virtual reality, and it ended up being a solution looking for a problem. I think of this is a personal opinion, again, not backed by data, it's more gut instinct. I feel like multi-view is no one, I don't know if anyone was asking for
Yeah,
multi-view.
I
Like
agree.
I can't see, I've been a YouTube subscriber for years. I used multi-view once just to check it out. I have never used it since. Like I just don't know.
Look, we did multi-views at Coachella in 2016, 17, which is like, you could change your camera and blah, blah, blah. And, we saw the same thing over and over. The first thing you drop people into is where they're going to stay, most of them. The people who are going to actually switch a little bit, and then they want the director to direct them and for them to kind of lean back.
It's the red zone experience. Just
Right. It's the red zone.
like a whip around the league. Like you tell me what I need to know.
Right. So I think again, it's coming back to this. Okay, let's take a step back. The main KPI is watch minutes, total watch minutes. It's what every broadcaster wants. Get you to watch longer. They know what that's worth. So all of these things are attempts or experiments to boost that metric. And I think that what you need eventually is like a combination of features that are going to address different segments. Clearly, the people who are watching four games at once are core super fans. Are you building an experience for them? Or are you building an experience to try to get the casual fan deeper down the funnel, right? I think there's more opportunity in the casual fan down the funnel, right? So, like, for example, what's the first time experience of watching a new sport that you don't know? We do nothing to educate you, nothing. What is the likelihood that I like stumble upon a sport for the first time and then watch a whole match or whatever it is, or watch a second game? It's got to be tiny, right? There's so much opportunity there. And just like knowing that, we know it's your first time watching this league. We should do something different if it's your first time.
Well, actually, that your to your previous point about personalized interactive video, Multiview that is powered by AI, like we instead of me changing your video to something else, AI dictates what your next video should be or what if, especially in an Olympics goal zone type of an experience. Goal zone is a perfect use case for multi-view, by the way. Multiple different sports. US is competing in multiple sports at the same time. That's a perfect use case, just like March Madness is. But like there is an opportunity to have triggers, rules, or AI based on personalized patterns dictating what the next video that you should be watching is. So it's not a one to many experiences. Again, it's personalized experience, but in a broadcast format.
100%. There's so much that can be done here. One of them is just like this concept of what just happened. Everyone's like cheering for what happened. Okay, well, why? Right? The more that you understand why that is, the more you can cheer the next time that happens and kind of get into that community vibe and feeling like you're part of the experience. Maybe if it's your first time watching a sport, there's a little video that plays for you explaining the sport. I mean, something so simple, right? What you're about to watch, here's like a 30-second clip on like how the scoring works. So, imagine someone watching tennis for the first time. Someone's got to tell you how that works. How you know it's not intuitive.
Yeah, it is not intuitive. I agree with you. I know your use case specifically has been Formula One. And, if you want to share your anecdote about when you went for the race for the first time.
Sure, happy to share the story. So I was invited to go watch a Formula One race in the Paddock Club, which was a really cool experience. And I'm there. It's my first time experiencing a race ever, and I don't know the sport that well. Things are happening, people are cheering. I'm certainly not gonna ask there why everyone's cheering, that would be very embarrassing for me. But, if I don't ask, I certainly can't really kinda get into it, so I had this day there, and I left the event, and I said, "I'm not sure if I'd do that again." It's not because it wasn't awesome, I just don't get it. You know? But it's so easy to make me get it, and I could just go on ChatGPT and look up how the sport works or something like that. But it's too much friction, right? It needs to be, like, in the moment, fed to you without you doing anything, and just understanding who you are. We can do things like personalizing even how simply we explain it or how complex we explain it based on knowing attributes about you.
I know for a fact that I can make a Formula One fan out of you.
I'm ready to become one. So please, let's
There
do
is
it.
there is a lot people think they're like, "Oh, they're just going around and around." I was like, first of all, that's NASCAR. But second of all, yes, even if they're doing multiple laps, there is so much that happens in a single lap that
I just watched the movie, loved the movie.
I'm not a huge fan of the movie because it's as a Formula One fan, it's too unrealistic. But the sound effects and what they have shown, I mean, the visuals, it's tremendous. Really, really well done. And I'm as an Apple TV subscriber and an F1 TV subscriber, I'm finally saving money for once on streaming. So I'm actually
Wow,
really
for
happy.
once.
What a revelation.
I really wanna double down on this point, which is kind of you and I are working on it from different angles. We're working on it from, like, kind of the front end user experience, and you're also working on, like, how do you actually build that experience? What's the orchestration that makes it all possible? And I think that eventually we get to a place again, like, coming back to what we were talking about before, broadcast people, it's a departure, like, they like controlling the rectangle and knowing what's in the rectangle. This is a world where you may not know what's gonna be in the rectangle for that person. And also from a rights holder standpoint, like, the NFL is very particular about, like, what's in the rectangle, whereas some other leagues are, a little bit more open to experimenting with these kinds of things. Part of, I think, the reason why it's so slow is there's just a lot of moving parts and a lot of approvals that need to happen to make these things possible. It's not because the technology doesn't exist.
Yeah. No, I agree. And honestly, I mean, enterprises, and this is the core thesis behind our AI products, right? Like Genie, the whole thesis is internal coordination, internal approvals is where things slow down the most. We can solve for priorities shifting, but we can solve for in an existing workflow if things slow down, if the friction is because if the friction is interdepartmental approvals or coordination between the content team and the product team and the broadcast team and the engineering team, those can be solved by AI. And then obviously the technology side of things, right? Like even if you provided someone the A/B testing capabilities, the strategy that goes behind A/B testing, you have departments thinking about it. Now AI is making that easier as well. So there's a lot of points of friction that are getting eliminated that'll hopefully allow us to experiment and learn and iterate based on those learnings way quicker, which is actually exciting, right? From a product strategy, product development standpoint, it is exciting to see a future where products can get developed so fast and enterprises can experiment so fast that hopefully that drives a better consumer experience faster.
Yeah. I think when you can do more with less people, then by nature, the less people have more decision-making power, so decisions happen faster. I don't know exactly how fast that transition happens, but eventually I think it does yield acceleration of better user experiences
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree. I agree. What are you most excited about going forward? I know you've been working on you're always cooking up new prototypes and demos. So I find it hard to keep up with it. Is there anything in particular that you've been working on that you're excited about?
We've got a brand new product, which is so most of Maestro's history is built on engaging and monetizing the core audience, and we're still very heavily involved there. But we have a new product that's more about top of funnel growth, and that's about how to grow your audience through influencers. Basically, some of these influencer streams, alt streams, whatever they're called, we call them co-streams. And they solve kind of what I think is one of the number one problems that any sports broadcaster is probably thinking about: new audience, younger audience. We want to bridge old media to new media, right? New media is kind of through an influencer, old media is direct from the broadcaster, and kind of like give a way for you to distribute that content through the influencer. So far, we're seeing some pretty crazy acceleration there. But I think what's more exciting to me is now I can offer more of a holistic approach, right? What part of the funnel are you trying to solve? And even helping the customer think about it in a funnel sense, back to what we've been talking about, right? Do you even have a funnel? Can you see where the drop off is in your funnel? What are you driving people to? Okay, can we measure that? Right? Do we have attribution tracking? I mean, it's kinda, again, like, getting, like, the scaffolding in place where once that exists, it's gonna really accelerate things.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely, the demo that you gave me, and this has obviously been a few months ago now, so I'm sure the product has come to a whole new level. But like, you've practically white coded this thing, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been pretty wild to build something from scratch solo. I didn't wanna be the CEO that said, "You have to use AI or you're fired,"
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I needed to, like, actually use the tools and learn how to do it, but I think it's been instrumental in helping me think about how to build more efficient organizations that can do more with less. And just frankly, the biggest lesson I've learned as an entrepreneur, and I know you've learned it too, product market fit is everything. In a world where anything can be built and quickly, it's even more so important to, like, what you should build, right? Back to the theory of jobs to be done. Who is it for? What problem is that customer hiring your problem to do for them? Right? Really understanding the pain. Where are they? When are they? How are they? What device are they on? Right? Like all these sorts of things. It's critical. And so I think everything we're doing now is trying to find a way to speed up, because I think that's one of the biggest advantages that any startup has: speed. Like the AI transformation in small organizations should happen much faster than in big ones. And there will be a gap of time where that disparity will be huge. And I think a lot of disruption will occur.
I agree. I think the large enterprises, if they adopt AI well, and they remove that coordination tax, orchestration friction, they do have certain benefits that get can will compound over time, but they have to be more open to it. I think right now everyone's a little bit scared, right? Like, you see the events from this weekend with Moltbot or Claudebot, whatever they call it now. It's a little, it's a little scary. No one knows what they should or shouldn't be doing. What are they exposing if they adopt AI too quickly without the guardrails against it? I understand the reticence, but I do think done right, there are such massive efficiencies and productivity gains.
It's scary. I don't wanna I hesitate to use Maltbot or, like, give it access to my emails, even though I love the idea of it sending emails on my behalf, and I think it could do it after it's trained well enough, but I'm
I
terrified of it.
don't I won't do it.
I
I
think it's hard for CEOs to do it.
I mean, I've definitely adopted AI in many different ways, whether I'm using Granola, ChatGPT, Claude Code, vibe coding platforms, IDEs. Absolutely. This autonomous agents that sort of act on my behalf, I am still a little nervous for that.
Yeah, and I think that this is somewhat of a cultural shift is coming to terms with what level of privacy we're comfortable with. I mean, there are people that went and used Maltbot and gave it access to everything. I mean, you see like Claude work is like give it access to your whole computer, like every single file directory, do whatever it wants. I had a feeling for a long time that when it comes to the convenience, when the value gets good enough and the convenience is good enough, you're going to trade off privacy. I mean, we have done that as a society for 10, 15, 20 years in digital. It just gets more and more convenient and we give up more and more of our data. So, we're kind of approaching the period where, like, once you're wearing a pin that's recording you all the time and you give it access to your computer, what's left?
Yeah.
That's the end. That's all there is. Everything I'm creating and saying and doing, you have it. So what does that mean? I'm not really sure. I do think that I think that if you are a person that figures out how to use tools to accelerate yourself, you're going to be differentiating, right? We're actually interviewing for that now. Just build something right now. Let's just see how you do it. How do you interact with the AI? What are your prompts? Like, how do you make decisions with it? I just want to see what you're doing, your process,
Yeah.
right?
It's critical thinking. It's like I genuinely believe liberal arts degrees are going to be far more important going forward than engineering degrees.
The irony is insane, but
How you think, how you problem solve is, and not to say that engineering coders do it all day long. I just mean like what you ask it to do is more important than the actual end product.
totally. I mean, I've told engineers in my company, typing code is over forever. Typing code, not paying you to type it, right? I'm paying you to commit good quality code. Wouldn't you rather be using your brain to be thinking and reading and analyzing all day long? That's the fun part, right? Who cares about typing?
I hated. I remember my in my weakest course was programming, and it was because I just hated all the syntax. Like,
That's my
I,
least favorite part too. That's gone now.
yeah, it's
It's
done.
it's the glory
It's
days,
done.
honestly.
Yeah,
You can code in any language you want. You never know about all the, idiosyncrasies. You can just think about like system design and your requirements. And
I appreciate you coming on. We've got some really good material here. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for listening.
of course, thank you so much for having me. I always love talking with you. You're one of my most trusted friends and colleagues in the industry who just, I feel like you've got the pulse better than anybody else out there. So I'm looking forward to continuing to figure out how we can partner more in the future.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Future of Fandom. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow LiveLike on LinkedIn for more conversations with the people shaping what's next in the world of sports and media. Until next time, keep building for fans, not just users.